Father Michael was reading in silence in his chambers when he was startled by a noise coming from another room inside the church. Before going to investigate, he put away a small envelope inside his pocket. The priest found none other than his child, Daniel Reed, searching for something among his own belongings. The detective noticed the priest approaching and stopped his activity for a split second before returning to it.
Have you decided to finally move in as I offered?
No. I feel safer in my room in the motel.
You have learned a lot. I am very proud of what you have accomplished so far, my son. Nevertheless, you should listen to reason when I tell you are in a more vulnerable position out there.
Daniel did not respond.
Can you tell me at least what you are doing here?
I'm looking for some notes I might have left in here. Nosferatu politics and relationships are exhausting, and more than a little complicated.
I have taught you all about hunting and feeding and about our laws and how to keep yourself from being destroyed. But I have not told you anything about our origin and the history of the King's Court.
I don't have time for this. I am in the middle of something.
Isn't information vital to your trade? Do you think anyone else would be willing to share such knowledge with you at no cost? Maybe understanding the whole picture of the court will help you make sense of our politics, my son.
Daniel deliberated silently for a while.
Okay, I am all ears, just please. Don't start lecturing me on how to be a monster.
He said, sitting down facing his sire.
You probably have already met or at least heard about the tower. They are the old ways. They have existed since the dawn of Nosferatu history, and stipulated a lot of mythology to our origins. They believe in some grand scheme to the Nosferatu curse, and for millennia, they have behaved like a blood cult. To oppose the tower was to be alone and hunted. Our kind was stuck in a quagmire of contradictions, dark magic, and demonic worship. They were spread as far as our cursed blood could reach. But the age of the tower eventually would come to an end. The legend tells of a new House of the Blood, House Agnes, which emerged during the time of the Messiah. A Nosferatu from House Dracul was miraculously transformed by his blood and became the founder of this new house. How this happened exactly varies from one version to another. This new founder was exempt from several aspects of our curse. It is said that he worked miracles and terrified the elder Nosferatu of his time by the unique state of his condition. When the Agnes founder brought new people into the blood and they shared his powers, it was considered heresy to the old ways. Nonetheless, many eager to escape the curse went into pilgrimage to meet and be made like him. Unfortunately, he was incapable of doing so. Embroiled in superstition and myth, those who were desperate started to sacrifice holy men and women, using their blood to try and replicate the miracle that gave birth to House Agnes. Those were dark times for people of faith. The tower was appalled by these events. Fearing to lose their grip onto power, they hunted this new family with all their might and hate, pouring their resources and intelligence into finding a way to eliminate the rift in Nosferatu society created by House Agnes. Like a Greek tragedy, the more blood they spilled in this cause, the more Nosferatu realized the error of the old ways. What followed was inescapable. One night, Carolus, a young man who was said to be virtuous above the many, was brought into the blood of House Agnes by its founder, and he decided to fight back to protect his brothers and sisters, but above all else, to forge a different path for our kind. Carolus spoke of the importance of clinging to our mortal soul and rejecting the monster inside each of us. Moreover, he went on to take up arms and slowly bring order to a troubled landscape. This Nosferatu managed to assemble others from each house, and they joined him in his battle. The tower fought back fiercely, but this was the first time it could not put down the rebellion against its bloody ways. The tower raised dark knights, sorcerers, and monsters and sent them against the rebels, but each of them failed. They persecuted Carolus and his entourage everywhere. But through bravery and great personal sacrifices, the rebels won victories and gained ground. New supporters joined them night after night as stories about miracles and the virtue of the rebels spread. They accused the tower and their beliefs of being an excuse for indulging the worst vices of Nosferatu nature and practicing devil worship. The rebels crowned their leader, Carolus, a king, and he organized his associates into a round table where each knight represented one of the houses. A folk hero was chosen as Paladin of House Leviathan. A liberator was chosen as Paladin of House Strix. A magician was chosen as Paladin of House Dracul. A duelist was chosen as Paladin of House Ashkari. A midwife was chosen as paladin of House Basilisk. A reformed criminal was chosen as paladin of House Panthera. A wanderer was chosen as paladin of House Morrigan. A priest was chosen as paladin of House Irkala. A sailor was chosen as paladin of House Orlok. A sower was chosen as paladin of House Volkos. A healer was chosen as paladin of House Moroi. A king was chosen as paladin of House Agnes. In the year 500 AD, there was a terrible battle. At one side, the tower was led by their high priestess, a vicious sorceress, and her most trusted archon as her Black Knight. While at the other, Carolus led his round table. The rebels won, and the tower was reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. This was known henceforth as the Second Fall. The early Middle Ages had given birth to a new path for our kind, the King's Court. It set in place rules and morals to set us apart from monsters. The King's Court hinged on the idea of valuing whatever shreds we still had from our human existence before the long night. We would stay close to anything that could help us to resist our Nephilim as hard as we could. The court banished the nightmares of old and powerful Nosferatu from ages past were destroyed. Those who survived were the ones who hid, resigning themselves to sleep. The victors of the battle against the tower went into anonymity, ready to intervene should its threat once again become dire. The Round Table worked behind the scenes to help the court spread everywhere. Soon, almost all Nosferatu had forgotten about Babylon and the old ways, and were more worried about their mortal soul fiefdom and liege. The general structure was more or less the same we have today. The king would rule as a protector of the customs and laws, together with a council that would ensure the rest of the Nosferatu had representation and participation into the process of rulership. The great nobles are the dukes which have a vote in the king's council. The lesser nobles are the counts and barons which receive small domains to protect and manage. One special case is the marquise, which usually receives a diplomatic or strategic role, be it either dealing with the other supernatural creatures which share this world with mortals and Nosferatu, or keeping the political stability and peace inside the king's court. The king nominates a paladin or shire reaver to be responsible for enforcing his decrees and laws. Here in Dreadford, we go with shire reaver. You may have heard of Bartholomew. The reaver is assisted into his duties by the horseman. I am myself a count, and the second in line of our faction in House Strix. The only one ahead of me is Dupont, who is a duke. It all was set up to work like a charm, but deterioration seems to be inescapable. Everything that Nosferatu dare to touch rots. There are whispers about the Round Table no longer being united, or maybe even existing at all. The tower was rebuilt mysteriously. Some say that it represents inevitable facets of our existence, and that it will return as long as our kind remains. Others ascribe its return to direct influence from other worldly masters. But the theory I like the most is the Round Table split, and one or more of its knights turned against it, betrayed the rest, and are responsible for the old enemy's rebirth.
What happened to the first king?
Who knows if he ever existed, my son? Maybe there was a noble, virtuous king who assembled a group of knights to fight the tower. Or maybe this legend was created to serve as a self-aggrandizing tool for lords and ladies drunk with power.
You really don't like admitting you don't know something, don't you, Michael? What about House Agnes? I have never heard about it. Do we have any of them here in this city?
What do you think, my son? As if something holy would have anything to do with our kind in this wretched city.
If all these stories are just ancient myths and fairy tales, how did the court start here in Dreadford?
The King's Court of Dreadford was started by a group of Nosferatu who arrived with their brood during the 18th century. Abrantes from House Volkos, Francis Stephen from House Dracul, Justine de la Chapelle from House Strix, Maastricht from House Orlok, Adelaide from House Morrigan, the Hermit from House Leviathan, Lodewijk van der Hoeven from House Irkala, and the Betrayer from House Ashkari, whose name was erased from history.
I've never heard these names. Wait a minute, you said one of them was called the Betrayer. I think the Shire Reaver was saying something like that to Van Arden.
They formed the previous council, the first council this city ever had. Each of them served as duke, with one of them, the Betrayer, ruling as king, thanks to him being the most powerful among them. Within a few decades, they succeeded in putting together a fairly powerful king's court. Soon after, the tower arrived and challenged them for control of the city. The contest between the king's court and the tower was brutal, but the king's court was able to repel the tower and kept most of Dreadford to itself. This assured a century of prosperity and peace during which we flourished, as did the city and the mortals who lived here. Unfortunately, in the last decade of the 19th century, the unthinkable happened. The king himself allied with the tower, and in an act of betrayal, they descended upon the court like vultures. During a single night, the king murdered each of the dukes while the tower invaded the city. Only one member of the council survived that fateful night: Francis Stephen of House Drakel, our current king. He led the counterattack, and in the struggles that followed, managed to defeat and kill the betrayer, while the leaders of the tower fled in retreat. Francis Stephen was crowned as Your Serene Highness. He nominated a duke for the council from each house among the Nosferatu, who most valiantly fought for our victory. The house of the betrayer was purged, and our present Ashkaris are from another bloodline. They have nothing to do with the betrayer, but are still targeted with a lot of suspicion. House Urkala and all its members disappeared during the tumultuous nights of the Great Betrayal. One house was found guilty of having colluded with the betrayer, House Morrigan, which was sentenced with royal censure and had its members punished for their crimes. Not many of them are left nowadays. As soon as all this was over and the new king's council was established, the new king retired into a secluded and discreet lifestyle. He rules the city through the council to this very day.
So you were saying Dupont is some kind of war hero? I would never have guessed it.
The same as each of the sitting dukes of the council. They are children from the first Nosferatu of their house to arrive here, sons and daughter of the original council of Dreadford, regrettably lost during the Great Betrayal. Well apart from Van Arden, as I said, he and his brood, which arrived at a later time to the city. They helped the hunt for the remaining members from the previous House Ashkari until none were left. After that, he petitioned the council to join it as duke, and it was decided to grant him his request.
And why would a king do that? Why would he turn against his own court?
They say he was driven to madness by the dogma of the tower, but not much is known about him anymore. His name and history were excluded from the official records as punishment for his crimes.
Michael, where were you during all this?
Well, I think that is enough history for tonight, my son. I am tired and the sun is coming up any minute now. Rest well. I hope you have good luck with your current endeavor.
The priest retired to his quarters, leaving Daniel to his suspicions alone. He had a lot to chew on now. Daniel returned to his search for his notebook and found it.
I have no intention to count on luck.